Eyo Value Investors, how are you doing? My name is Stijn and welcome to my YouTube channel. Nouveau Monde Graphite just released some juicy news around a potential uplisting, so I'll do a deeper dive into that in this video. This update is just a couple of days after my last video on Nouveau Monde Graphite, so I'll try to keep this video as short as possible. So first, I've received a lot of questions on this topic, so I'll talk about what actually happens to your shares when the reverse split happens. Second, we'll talk about the new news around the uplisting. Then after that, we'll decide if it's good or bad for the longer term prospects of this company. Let's go. So I got a lot of questions on this on YouTube and Reddit after my last video, so I'd like to clarify this a bit. Check out my last video on Nouveau Monde Graphite, now linked in the top right corner of this video, to go deeper into the reverse split. But what actually happens to your shares when the reverse split happens? Well, Nouveau Monde Graphite decided on a 10-to-1 split. So if you hold, let's say 800 shares, you'll hold 80 after the consolidation. And keep in mind the consolidation happens on the 31st of March. But the fact that you're now holding just 80 shares is totally fine, since everyone else is also doing a 10-to-1 split. Therefore, your shareholders' equity stays exactly the same. That means that if Nouveau Monde Graphite is a really large pie in this analogy, your 80 shares will still reflect the exact same percentage as your 800 shares did before. So in the long run, you as a shareholder gain or lose nothing. But as I have talked about in my last video and we'll talk about in just a bit, this was needed for the uplisting to the New York Stock Exchange. Okay, cool. So on the 31st of March, we'll just divide our shares by 10. But then what happens if you have a number that's not easily divisible by 10? Well, you'll be rounded up or down. So when you hold, for example, 86 shares, 86 divided by 10 equals 8.6. So after the reverse split, you will hold 9 shares. And if you hold, for example, let's say 55 shares divided by 10 equals 5.5. And that will be rounded down to 5 shares. So the point of rounding up or down is 5 and 6. 5 will be rounded down and 6 will be rounded up. I really hope this clarifies the reverse split. And if you're a long-term shareholder, I would totally advise buying a couple of shares more so that you have a number that ends on a 6. So then when you're holding a number that ends on a 6, you'll get rounded up on the 31st of March. And when you get rounded up, you'll gain 4 shares effectively for free. That's a couple of bucks for free, man. And keep in mind the reverse split happens on the 31st of March. Okay, so we now know all about the consolidation and we know what happens during the reverse split to our shares. Let's continue with the news. So Nouveau Monde Graphite just tweeted about their application for an uplisting to the New York Stock Exchange, like a couple of hours ago. See here the application to uplist to the New York Stock Exchange. And now if you click on that link, we get to this article. And the article goes like this. Nouveau Monde Graphite is pleased to announce that it has applied to list its common shares on the New York Stock Exchange. This is big news. Normally an uplisting takes about 6 to 10 weeks-ish. And if this goes through, Nouveau Monde Graphite will gain a lot of new institutional and individual investors, which can be a large catalyst in and on itself. We as outsiders already knew Nouveau Monde Graphite was really busy with an uplisting, just not that it could happen this early. Earlier, the CEO Eric Dessonnier gave us a time frame of somewhere in the year 2021. And now it seems likely the uplisting will happen before the midpoint of this year. Awesome. The listing, of course, remains subject to the approval of the New York Stock Exchange and the satisfaction of all applicable listing and regulatory requirements. Well, what are those requirements then? A quick Google search shows us that for any company to list on the New York Stock Exchange, the requirements include 1.1 million shares outstanding, which they easily check, even after the consolidation. A market value of $100 million. Well, if we look at their current market cap, yeah, easy check. And a share price of around $4. And well, after the consolidation, this will most likely be a check. And then Nouveau Monde Graphite needs to meet one of the following requirements. Some are about pre-tax incomes, some are about valuation, revenues, assets, but as far as I can tell, Nouveau Monde Graphite will most likely decide to meet number 3 of the list. And number 3 is the one for affiliated companies, where the global market capitalization needs to be around $500 million, which, if we look at the current market capitalization on the American over-the-counter or OTC markets, we can see that they barely hit this mark at $512 million market cap. So a check for now. And besides this one, they need operating history of 12 months. And this they do have, so that's a check too. And it seems to me that Nouveau Monde Graphite is doing their utmost best to hit all requirements. They do need to keep their market capitalization high, but for this I'm not that worried. And besides the market cap, one of the requirements is a share price of $4 per share, which is why we did the reverse split we just talked about. So logically, Nouveau Monde Graphite will tick all the boxes for an uplisting to the New York Stock Exchange. And uplisting seems inevitable, but we need to keep in mind that it can still be cancelled or delayed for one reason or another. So be careful when trading this. And we'll talk about the longer term implications of this uplisting in just a bit. At the end of the article, Nouveau Monde Graphite also talks about a prospectus they just filed. And this prospectus allows them to sell and issue up to $500 million in shares, debt securities, warrants, etc. from time to time for a period of 25 months. So Nouveau Monde Graphite is now able to issue up to $500 million in assets to gain funding for their projects. And this allows them to have financial flexibility and allows them to act fast when the market opportunities arise. So in my opinion, this is little to be worried about. Some of the largest shareholders of Nouveau Monde Graphite are part of the management team. And they, of course, do not want to dilute their share of the company if they can help it. But it's good to see that they at least have the opportunity to gain more funding if opportunities arise, and this really excites me about the future of Nouveau Monde Graphite. So is all this news good or bad? Well, in my opinion, the filing for the uplisting to the New York Stock Exchange is most definitely good. If we look at the requirements of the New York Stock Exchange, it seems that the doors are wide open for Nouveau Monde Graphite to list their shares on the New York Stock Exchange. And that would mean a lot of more exposure to the stock. And if more people know about this company and hedge funds are finally able to buy into the story, well, that will mean a lot of more liquidity coming into the stock. And with all this newfound liquidity, I do not see anything else happen than the stock price to skyrocket. Do make sure to tread carefully though. It could also be a buy the rumor, sell the news situation. After all, I'm a long-term investor, so I can only talk through that perspective. Then what about the prospectus to issue up to $500 million more in shares and warrants? Well, that's neither good nor bad in my opinion. Of course, nobody wants to see their shares dilute, but we need to keep in mind the management, which are all large stakeholders of this company as well. They do not want to see their position dilute either. However, if Nouveau Monde Graphite were to raise just a bit more capital, after which they can fuel even more exponential growth, well, then this whole issuing of new shares is of course a good thing. Long term, I believe the management will do what's best for us shareholders. And I believe in Eric Desunier to make the right decisions. After all, that's why I decided to invest in this company. Therefore, I'm not worried about diluting at all. And I believe Nouveau Monde Graphite will increase my shareholders' equity for decades to come. And that's why you and I should be investing anyways. I really hope you guys enjoyed this quick update on Nouveau Monde Graphite. And if you did, please give it a like and maybe even subscribe. Comment down below what you want to talk about next, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace.